the choice of the songs. What was the song? Oh, Now Let Us Sing. I love that song. And we don't do the hymnal songs in our coastal UU fellowship. And so I'm like, yay, I'm so excited to pretend to sing it today. So I really appreciated that. I also wanted to just say thanks for inviting me back. I was here a number of years ago when we were at the Senior Center, and I'm only sorry that Ted DeChatelet is not here today. I texted him and was like, why aren't you sitting next to me? But I want to say thank you to the folks who helped bring me back today, Ken and Chris and Pat, and also thanks to Eric and Jay and Bryn for the music, and all of you who I don't know yet. And it's also just nice to see some people from my old haunts in the UU Salem group. I see a couple of faces of folks that, you know, would hang out with back in the early 2000s, 1900s kind of era. So a few years ago, I was in a really stuck place, and I was just looking for sources that I could resonate with to maybe help get me unstuck. And I came across a TED Talk, because isn't it always about a TED Talk? Don't we love our TED Talks? I just feel like there's some that we just go back to, and this is one that I've gone back to a number of times. And it's Dr. Lucy Hone. She talks about 3 secrets of resilient people. And that is what I framed a talk for our Central Coast UU Fellowship a few years ago. It was kind of after really working through some of this stuff. And so that's where this subject came from today. But her work is as a resiliency expert. And when she started off her TED Talk, she asked for folks to raise their hand or stand up if they are able to these questions. And so to kind of give this some framing and context, I actually would like to do the same exercise if you're game. And so if you're able, we'll ask you to stand. If you've ever lost someone you truly love, if you've ever had your heart broken, if you ever struggled through an acrimonious divorce, if you've ever been the victim of infidelity, if you ever lived through a natural disaster, if you've ever been bullied or made to feel redundant, if you ever had a miscarriage or an abortion or struggled through infertility, and if you or anyone you love have had to cope with mental illness or dementia or physical impairment or had to cope with suicide, just take a look around, right? Adversity doesn't discriminate. You can be seated. Thank you for playing along. I think in some of those ways, it also kind of just calls some of those memories forward for us, which hopefully gives us some context to come from today. I'll tell you more about the resilient secrets in a bit, but I wanted to start with 2 personal stories that relate to this. The first one was about the unstuck place that I was in. And then I'll share a further backstory. But I had been with my ex-wife, and we were together for 7 years. And it was joyful and buoyant and lovely, and just no signs of strife, which maybe is a sign, right? Like maybe, like, wait, there's no struggle? But one day, came home and she said, I've never been in love with you. You can't unhear those words. And I just couldn't put it together. And that's what led to the being stuck. because it's like, but everything of the last 7 years tells me something different. So you're telling me you've never been in love with me. We were very about the ceremony, had a couple of domestic partnership ceremonies and a marriage, so like it just didn't compute. And I just was like toiling about it and stuck for quite a long time. And she just told me like, no, it's nobody else. Even though I suspected something was going on with the next door neighbor, she completely denied it. A friend of mine said, no, it did happen. But I confronted my now ex-wife, and she's like, no, it didn't happen. I don't know if you heard the recent story on New York Times about gaslighting, but I think that qualifies. But I just felt like it's crazy making. Like you're telling me there's nothing going on, but a friend confirmed it. And a year and a half later, finally she said, yes, it was happening. But for a year and a half, just kind of like in this place of I don't know how to make sense of it. And I was very stuck. So I just was in that place of feeling broken and brokenhearted. And just really hard to kind of spring back from that. And it sounds like some of you have had similar experiences where you just know you are in a rut and the grooves are carved and it's really hard to more out of those. So Dr. Hone, Lucy Hone, the person who came up with the 3 secrets for resilient people, was actually in her research and work professionally a resiliency expert, and had one day been driving with her daughter's friend in the car, and the car was hit, and the daughter and the friend were instantly killed. And she, of course, was just bereft, and at the same time was thinking in this moment, like, why me? And having to kind of grieve that, whilst knowing that she is a resiliency expert. The learning of resiliency is, in some respects, recognizing that everyone will have a hardship and a struggle, and coming around to a place of recognition of, oh, why not me? Like that is kind of the understanding that resilient people share, is recognizing that there will always be those hard things. And one thing may not happen to you, but also not comparing one thing to another. And I'm going to bounce back to my second story here. My second story, and I'm really grateful that the children are out of the room because I was very worried about sharing this. And this is a content warning, and it deals with some trauma and abuse. So I apologize in advance, but if you need to take care of yourself, I want to give you a beat before I share something that's pretty solemn. I was raised by a mom that was not like other moms. And when I say the city Lake Oswego, I think we all have some ideas of what Lake Oswego is about. Wealth, the Beverly Hills of Oregon, everything's perfect and pristine, and nothing bad ever happens. Ha ha ha, right? And I was dealing with a mother who is bipolar, manic, and paranoid schizophrenic. And my parents separated and divorced when I was young. We lived with my mom, and she was a very angry person. Extreme yelling, violent, unwarranted physical punishments, kicking, pulling hair, and dragging my 2 younger sisters and I, and using the fireplace poker as her weapon of infliction. And on small children, you can just imagine. Her bouts of rage and the punishments enacted never fit the crime. And there was no natural, spontaneous, or verbal or physical affection. And the abuse became so bad that my 2 younger sisters and I ended up at a point in state custody. Short-lived, but we did. and that childhood abuse and trauma, I eventually made a decision at 16. I had to brave it and escape and move to live with my dad. But also the 16-year-old grieving, having not had a maternal parent, I did feel very much like the victim. Like, why me? Why me? And yet, I'll tell the outcomes of these decisions, but I knew that having endured such a harsh, traumatic childhood, feeling utterly powerless, made me feel more victimized. And also the cloak of living in Lake Oswego, where the perception is everything and the reality could be very different, but no one ever saw that. We didn't have the wealth, but we couldn't talk about anything. It was a very harsh situation. I'm not saying that, oh, poor me, I lived in Lake Oswego. We lived in the poor part back then, but the mask was what we had to was performative. And just recognizing that we all couldn't talk about this trauma, and it was just a really hard situation. So for me, I wish I had learned at a younger age that everyone was experiencing hardship and adversity, because I very much felt singular and alone with me and my family and my younger sisters. So all of this is to say that these two events were very formative in my own upbringing and in my adult life, in terms of experiences that I needed more training and resilience practice in my life. And I just didn't talk about that with friends, about what a resilience practice looked like. So I wanted to share the 3 steps that Dr. Hone talks about resilience practice. And the first one is, I'm going to use an adult language word. Are we okay with adult language in here? Resilient people recognize that shit happens. And I think I just came to that realization much later in life, unfortunately. But they recognize that suffering is a part of life. And when tough times come, suffering is a part of everyone's human existence. It may not look the same, you to you, but we're thinking about how many people stood at different points, and how we've experienced different adversities and tough times. And recognizing that everyone does experience that adversity and hardship can stop us from feeling discriminated against, moving from why me to what Dr. Hone was saying, why not me? Another secret or strategy that resilient people employ is that they are very good at choosing carefully where they select their attention. And they have a habit of appraising situations realistically and managing situations they can change and accept where they cannot change. And thinking about that AA saying about accept what you cannot change, the courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I feel like that is something that resilient people do practice. Another piece that she mentioned was that resilient folks are looking for the good, even in tragedy, not to wash over what happened, but recognizing the things to be grateful for. And I remember Oprah years and years ago about the gratitude journal and thinking about that, but identifying 3 things every day that you can be grateful for, looking for those and noting those, even actually physically taking the time to document and track those, that those can lead to higher levels of gratitude, happiness, and less depression. Giving oneself permission to feel grateful, even in adversity. And just recognizing that that is a resilience practice that is intentional and deliberate, and it's an ongoing effort to find the good in the world. The third secret and strategy, and this is one that I think I grapple with more on a regular basis. I do the resilient practice of the 3 good things a day, and I'm glad that that is something that I've been able to employ more. And it's, in some ways, it feels very repetitive. Grateful for my friends, grateful for my dog, grateful for living at the ocean. Like, some of those are, but then there are also really beautiful moments of days and memories and things and connections with others that I also am able to add to my gratitude practice. And this third one that I was saying that can be more challenging is the question of, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? And Dr. Hone mentions that, there are moments and times where you can get into that, maybe like just kind of a cycle of looking at photos that make you feel sad, or looking at old texts, or looking at old Facebook memories that can draw up more of that sorrowful reflection. Is that really helping or harming me, or do you need to put that away? So it's a powerful question to continue to ask. And that question, she says, resilient people ask again and again. Is it helping or harming me? And the piece of this that comes from that is that recognition of practicing kindness with yourself and thinking about, we are in control of our decision making. So what are we doing, and are we doing this, and is it helpful or harmful to us? Recognizing that maybe this wasn't the direction in our life that we anticipated going. I think about this often is, if I had not left my childhood home, what would have come of me? Because I think I see what happened to my 2 younger sisters, who, when I left, I had to leave them. It was a brave kind of escape, and I knew I couldn't look back, but I had to still have a relationship with my sisters. But I saw how emotionally and developmentally, socially stunted they were, and educationally stunted they became, because they got left in that environment. And that's a sorrow. And I also recognized that I had to, sorry, Eric. I had to leave, because so many other things that I wouldn't have known would have been possible. So it's that whole, if you had it to do over again, question that sometimes I think about. Like, I would not have wanted my childhood, and at the same time, would it have made me the person I am? And I think about this in terms of my marriage. I would not have wanted that outcome. And yet, the things that have come as a result of it, and people would say, like, that whole, like, closes the door, open a window phrase, I was like, that's not helpful to me. But they would say things like that, or you never know, this is a blessing. I'm like, I'm not sure I'm buying your language on this, because it feels so scalding, on my heart. At the same time, the outcomes that I could not have foreseen, the moments where the sliding door moments where I'm like, well, now because of that, all of these things have happened. I think I am more grateful for what has come as a result. And I don't know that I would have said that a couple of years ago, because of how hard this had felt, right? And perhaps some of you can relate, like, if not for this, all of these things happened. But for me, so many of those things have been joyful, delightful manifestations of my dreams that I don't think I would have had I just been married, which was so much about what I thought I wanted. I want to just go on. Oh, this other part that I want to talk about, and maybe you heard this. I think it was a part of This American Life a couple of years ago. But we're all familiar with the 5 stages of grieving. Wait, 5 stages of, is that what it's called? Did I already lose the name of it? 5 stages of grieving, yeah. Right, isn't it? Denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. But there is a 6th stage. And the researcher who studied with Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. His name is David Kessler, and he researched that there's really a sixth stage. Have you all heard about this? I think a lot of people haven't, but I feel like, oh my gosh, this feels revelatory, because when I tell you what it is, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's it. And it's finding meaning. And he talks about, of course, we know that there's not a linear pathway that we go through. All right, checked denial, then anger. Okay, checked, but then it kind of flows and it ebbs and flows, and there's no one right way to grieve. But what he talked about was the meaning making is the sixth stage, that we have made meaning out of the adversity, out of the tragedy, the hardship, the trauma. And he said that there's 7 factors that guide the finding meaning. Meaning is relative and personal. It takes time and you cannot rush it. It could take years. And I think for me, that has been the process. And that's where I was feeling so stuck, is I can't make meaning of this. Meaning doesn't require understanding. And you may not understand, like, for example, why a relationship ends or why a pet dies. It just may not be something you can fully grapple with and understand. And when you find meaning, you may not feel that it was worth the cost of it. So that whole was it worth it to do this, or would I do it again? You won't necessarily feel that way. And that the loss, whatever the loss is, or the tragedy, or the hardship is not a test. It's not a lesson, but it's something to handle. But you wouldn't necessarily call it a gift or a blessing. But the loss is just something that happens, right? And then we work through it, hopefully, resiliently. And the meaning is so personal. Someone else can't do that for us. The people who say when you close the door, or when God closed the door, other people can't be that for us or do that for us. It's really an internal process. And then meaningful connections can replace the painful memories in time. So I love thinking about that and how David Kessler has been able to research the meaning making out of the grief. And when I heard that, I was like, this makes so much sense, because we just haven't formalized it in terms of a process, but we do find and search for. And I think that is our natural inclination, to search for those ways to make sense of or make meaning out of something that happened. So he talks also about, we're very maybe accustomed to post-traumatic stress, but he also talks about post-traumatic growth, and that is the meaning finding. And then I'm reading my notes, hold on a second. And then we shouldn't just have to fight our way through grief. And he gives examples of, if our car engine light goes on, we know we need to go and get it addressed and get it fixed. If something is leaking, then you go and get it fixed, you contact a plumber. So it shouldn't just be something that you have to muscle through, but that there are professionals to seek support and help from. And that we don't just get over the loss, we don't recover from a loss, but we learn to live with it. Again, a resilient practice. So starting this process, thinking about a way that you might honor something that was an adverse experience that you had, and a way to think about it, and what's happened in your life, and how you can find the meaning out of it. When I think about what he was saying about, you don't just muscle through, you don't just fight your way through it, you seek help. I did seek professional counseling and therapy, which was such a godsend, because I needed someone who I could just lay it all out there with, and also connect some dots between what happened in childhood, and maybe things that how I responded in terms of my own marriage, right? Things that maybe I was conflict averse or things like that, that you could imagine make a lot of sense given the childhood experience that I had. when I would share it, when I think another piece of this is identifying the people, and not lots of people, but a few people that you can trust, who can hold space and the story and the pain with you to work through it. Not saying that they are the substitute for professional therapy, but you also have your close friends and people. And Brene Brown, another social scientist and researcher, talks about you share with the people who've earned the right to hear it. Let me say that again. You share with the people who've earned the right to hear it. Because it has to be something that is shared space, that it's not just a dump, that isn't something that we're also holding vulnerability with each other, that's shared. And I say that because when I was coming out of my marriage and in the grief and in the loss, I couldn't understand, I couldn't make sense of it, right? And I would share with this one person, and when I would start to get vulnerable, she would interrupt me and say, "Are you seeing a therapist?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm hearing the message that you're saying, I am incapable of delivering this level of friendship with you." And I'm like, I didn't remember the Brene Brown thing about you share with the people who've earned the right to hear it. I'm like, right. So we have different friendship levels. We know that. And I didn't gauge this person right. And I'm like, I now have that feedback. Got it. You are not someone I can safely and vulnerably share with. We will operate on a different friend level. Got it. But you have to know and identify who the trusted people are who can hear it. I'm just doing a time check. Okay. So just as a kind of like a review of the stages, the one thing I just want to say that I think is so valuable is about resilient practice is gratitude practice, naming or identifying things on a daily basis. Can be simple, doesn't have to be written down. Can be while you're in bed, before you go to sleep, or when you wake up in the morning. Might be a more lovely start to your day, although I do it at night. And then also adopting a kindness practice. And then asking yourself again and again, is what I'm doing helpful or harmful? And there was, the one other thing I want to say is a quick story. An interpreter educator, I'm a sign language interpreter by training. An interpreter educator that I know lost her son very tragically at 3 years old. And she lives in Tucson, Arizona. And she just was walking around and just feeling like everybody has a hardship, and just that kind of weighed on her, realizing like we're walking around but we're not really connecting, and I don't know what your heart is and I don't know what your heart is, but we all have it. And what a powerful way to recognize like we can be kinder to each other, recognizing that people all are going through something or have been through something. And she created this nonprofit organization, and the community of Tucson came together and painted all these ceramic chimes and little pieces to make chimes. And the organization is now called Ben's Bells. And they don't sell the bells, but they will plant them in the community with a little note that says, "You have found a Ben's Bell." And if you want to post it on a website. So I've been a part of this activity, both in Tucson, and then they tried to do it in Oregon. It didn't work, but they tried, and I was a part of that too. But I love the idea that like when you're off in a park and you just see some glimmer of like something shiny and colorful hanging in a tree, seems like it doesn't make sense in a park, that you go over and explore, and it's like, congratulations, you've found a Ben's Bell. Please use this and share kindness. It's kind of the spread kindness. And for me, what she did was she took the fragility and vulnerability and pain of her experience, recognizing we are all more connected. And for her, the kindness practice became a community movement. And I think perhaps Tucson is a little kinder today because of that. So just in terms of ways that this has helped me, I think it's helped me to really just recognize, and it maybe seems simple, but the aha of recognizing the hardship and adversity that we all experience, the people who stood the different things, it makes me more soft and wanting to seek that connection and story and know people more, and also respond with kindness and grace, recognizing that we all have had those struggles, and to push through, yes, with kindness. And Jay had mentioned in the chalice lighting, and I thought this was so beautiful, but like, how can we engage in a resilience practice? And I'll just end with this, with igniting the spark for others, and thinking about how we can be kind and ignite others' spark, even when we don't know what their heart is, and we don't have to know them on that level, but we know that we have the power, person by person, to engage and to connect and to be grateful for what we've gone through, even when it's hard, to ask the hard questions of, is what I'm doing helpful or harmful, but also to lead with grace and kindness to ourselves and others. And I'll leave it there.